How much longer are you going to keep looking for peace out there, when you have not been willing to build it within? You fill yourself with noise, with people, with distractions, with small doses of approval. And even so, there are nights when you are left alone with yourself, and feel that uncomfortable emptiness no one can cover up for you. That is the truth almost no one wants to face head-on. What you lack is not company. What you lack is making peace with your own life. Because when you do not know how to be with yourself, you end up begging for presence, swallowing emotional crumbs and calling happiness anything that distracts you from yourself. Stay with me. Gabriel here. Welcome to the Stoic Garden. Today we are going to walk through 9 Stoic principles for happiness and inner peace, 9 necessary jolts to stop depending on external noise and start building a life that can stand on its own from within. And when you reach the last one, you will understand why true calm does not appear when the world embraces you, but when you finally learn not to abandon yourself. Let us begin. 1. Accept your solitude with dignity and stop begging for company. Let us start with a truth that stings because it hits your pride and your wound at the same time. A lot of people are not afraid of being alone. They are afraid of feeling insignificant when no one looks for them. And that is why they accept empty conversations, lukewarm relationships, last resort invitations, and connections where they have to work twice as hard to receive half as much. They do not call it desperation, of course. They call it patience, understanding, a good attitude. But it is still emotional hunger dressed in elegant clothes. There is something deeply sad about watching a brilliant person lower themselves just to avoid facing the silence of a night alone. It starts with replying right away to someone who never does the same, then justifying absences that should never need explaining, then smiling in places where they feel uncomfortable just so they do not go home without a message on their phone. And little by little they trade their peace for cheap company, as if anyone's presence were better than their own, as if being with just anyone were more dignified than sitting with yourself and truly listening. No, brother, not every hug brings comfort, and not every silence is a punishment. Solitude is not always abandonment. Sometimes it is cleansing. Sometimes it is the empty room after removing from your life the person who brought noise, guilt, confusion, and crumbs. But you see that emptiness and get scared because you still have not learned to tell the difference between absence and freedom. You were taught to believe that if you are not surrounded by people, something must be wrong with you. That if you spend a weekend alone, you lost. That if you do not have a stack of messages waiting, you are worth less. What a ridiculous system. They measure your soul by notifications and then act surprised that you live in anxiety. Look honestly at your latest attempts to feel accompanied. How many came from real affection, and how many came from fear? How many times did you seek someone out, not because you admired them, but because you could not stand being left with yourself? That question is uncomfortable because it leaves very little room for the act, and the answer is usually brutal. Sometimes you do not miss the person. You miss the anesthesia. You do not want love. You want distraction. You do not want connection. You just do not want to feel the void. And until you admit that, you will keep entering relationships like someone walking into an emotional pharmacy, looking for quick relief from a problem that requires character. Dignity begins when you stop chasing what does not clearly choose you. When you understand that insisting where there is no reciprocity is not romantic, it is humiliating. There are people who want you close only as long as you stay available, compliant, understanding, and conveniently needy. The day you stand your ground, the day you stop begging, the day you stop sending that extra message that is always unnecessary, they call you cold. How curious. While you were dragging yourself around, you were adorable. Once you respect yourself, suddenly you are difficult. Right, it is not that you changed for the worse. It is that you stopped being useful to the person feeding off your insecurity. Learning to be alone does not mean becoming stone or despising others. It means stopping turning other people into crutches for walking through your own life. It means sitting down to eat without needing background noise so you do not have to hear yourself. Going for a walk without needing to tell someone every step. Coming home and not feeling like you are walking into defeat, but into a space that belongs to you. That is where something powerful begins. Because when your own company stops making you ashamed, other people's company stops becoming a desperate necessity, and then you choose better. You no longer enter out of hunger, you enter with discernment. Cato the Younger, who was hardly a soft man or someone eager to please the crowd, left a lesson that is more necessary today than ever. He preferred to remain firm in solitude rather than join the crowd in injustice. That may not sound pretty on a coffee mug, but in real life it is worth gold. Because many times you join people, environments, or relationships that diminish you just so you do not feel left out. And being surrounded by people who degrade you is not belonging. It is deserting yourself with an audience. So start with something simple and fierce at the same time. Stop calling it loneliness every time you finally have space to rebuild yourself. Stop begging for attention where you are barely tolerated. Stop giving your presence away to people who receive it as if they are doing you a favor. Your peace cannot keep being negotiated out of fear of emptiness. Emptiness, used well, becomes clarity. And from that clarity, you discover something that changes the game. When you know how to be with yourself, you are no longer dazzled by just anyone who shows up to fill the silence. And that leads us to what comes next, because once you stop begging for company, you have to face something even more important. The voice that stays with you all day inside your head. 2. Practice wisdom and choose your thoughts before you believe them. This is where most people lose the battle without realizing it. They do not fall because of what happens outside. They fall because of the automatic interpretation they make of what happens. An unanswered message becomes rejection. A criticism becomes condemnation. A mistake becomes proof of worthlessness. And within minutes your mind puts on a trial, hands down the sentence, and then forces you to live as if that story were true. Very efficient, yes, a disaster, but fast. The mind does not always inform you. Very often it dramatizes. And you, like a good spectator hypnotized by your own internal movie, swallow every scene without checking the script. You think something and immediately call it reality. You feel fear and immediately call it intuition. You compare yourself to someone else's life for 5 minutes and immediately decide you are behind. It is incredible how easily you hand the keys to your peace over to a passing thought, as if every mental occurrence deserved respect. No, not everything that appears in your head deserves a seat at the table. Some ideas only come to make a mess. Epictetus, who taught philosophy like someone teaching you how to defend yourself from a daily ambush, said it with brutal precision. Before reacting, examine the impression that has reached your mind and ask yourself whether it deserves your assent. What a gem. He did not say suppress it. He did not say dramatize it. He did not say post it across 20 social media stories. He said examine it. That is practical wisdom. Putting a thought under review before making it the owner of the house. Because an impression is not an order. A thought is not a command. An emotion is not an infallible compass. Think about how many times you ruined your own day by believing some absurd idea. They probably do not value me. I'm going to embarrass myself. I never change. Everyone is moving forward except me. And off you go, obediently acting according to that voice, as if it were an ancient sage and not a poorly trained echo of your insecurities. Are you really going to keep bowing down to any thought that walks in without knocking? Are you really going to let one badly formed inner sentence decide your mood, your actions, and even the way you speak to yourself? That is modern slavery. Not visible chains, but the habit of mental obedience without question. Stoic wisdom is not about emptying the mind or becoming an emotional statue. It is about learning to create a small but decisive distance between what you think and what you accept as true. That space saves you. That is where you stop reacting like a spring and start responding like an adult. That is where you discover you are not obligated to follow every mental impulse, just as you are not obligated to follow any stranger yelling something at you on the street. But with your mind, that is exactly what you do. An alarmist idea appears and you jump right behind it as if it were taking you somewhere intelligent. You have seen where it leaves you, exhausted and confused. Marcus Aurelius, an emperor and a man surrounded by real responsibilities, not imaginary nonsense, reminded himself that the happiness of life depends on the quality of your thoughts. Not the quantity, not the volume, not how dramatic they are when they appear. The quality. And quality means examination, discernment, inner clarity. It means asking yourself whether that thought brings you closer to the truth or only feeds an old wound. It means noticing when your mind wants to turn a small discomfort into a full tragedy with a soundtrack. Because let us be honest, sometimes you do not have a major problem. You have a poorly trained mind working overtime. Training that mind requires daily discipline. When the idea appears that you are not enough, do not embrace it so quickly. Ask where it comes from, what it is responding to, what real evidence supports it. When you feel that everything is going to go wrong, stop and see whether you're observing facts or manufacturing prophecies. When comparison takes over, remember that you're seeing display windows, not whole lives. And when guilt hits you for resting, for setting a boundary, or for not pleasing everyone, understand that many times it is not your conscience speaking. It is your conditioning protesting, because it can no longer control you so easily. Donald Robertson, who has translated this Stoic training into modern psychological language, explains that identifying and reframing distorted thoughts is a current way of practicing that old discipline of assent. Put into plain, everyday language, stop blindly believing the first thing your mind whispers when it is tired, wounded, or afraid, because a mind without examination turns assumptions into certainties and then calls the consequences destiny. And no, it was not destiny. It was a lack of inner vigilance. So starting today, do something that seems small, but changes the entire course of a life. Before you believe a thought, look at it the way you would look at an unreliable witness. Without hatred, but without naivety. Not everything deserves your trust. Not everything deserves your energy. Not everything deserves to become your identity. Wisdom begins when you stop saying, "I think this, therefore it is true," and start saying, "I think this, let us see whether it passes the test." That is where you recover command. That is where clarity returns. And when a person learns to govern what they think, they stop living dragged around by what they feel every minute. That prepares the ground for the next necessary blow, because it is not enough to think better if you keep running after pleasures that leave you empty inside. 3. Train temperance and stop chasing pleasures that leave you empty afterward. This is where many people confuse freedom with indulgence. They think living well means always doing whatever feels good, following every impulse, rewarding themselves all the time, never denying themselves anything. It sounds modern, attractive, even rebellious. It also sounds like the perfect recipe for a weak life. Because a person who cannot say no to themselves ends up becoming a slave to anything that offers quick relief. And then they wonder why they feel tired, scattered, empty, directionless. What a hard mystery to solve, of course. Temperance is not bitterness or punishment. It does not mean living with a frown or giving up everything pleasant, as if suffering were some kind of medal. It means something far more elegant and far more difficult, not letting pleasure rule you, eating without turning food into a refuge, resting without turning rest into escape, enjoying things without becoming dependent on them, because the problem is not pleasure itself, but the place it occupies within you. When it starts functioning as constant compensation, you are no longer enjoying it, you are numbing yourself, and emotional numbing always comes at a cost. Look at yourself honestly in those small behaviors that seem harmless. Opening your phone every 3 minutes so you do not have to think. Buying things you do not need just to feel a brief emotion. Looking for instant validation when you feel insecure. Eating out of anxiety. Saying yes to plans, excesses, or habits you know throw your life off balance just because you deserve it. That phrase has ruined more people than it seems, as if deserving something meant swallowing every impulse without question, as if rewarding yourself meant betraying yourself a little, only with background music and same-day delivery. Seneca, who knew Rome's excesses very well and the elegant self-deception of people who called themselves free while obeying their appetites, insisted that a man who is a slave to his pleasures cannot be master of himself. And you do not need to live in a Roman palace to prove it. Daily life is enough. There are people incapable of enduring even the smallest discomfort. If they get bored, they run to stimulation. If they get frustrated, they run to consumption. If they feel empty, they run to some shiny distraction, running all the time, filling all the time, avoiding all the time that uncomfortable moment when they would have to sit with themselves and admit that something inside is asking for order, not entertainment. Temperance is trained precisely there, in that uncomfortable second between impulse and action. In that moment when you can choose not to obey automatically. It seems small, but that is where character is built. That is where a person stops living at the mercy of what they feel and begins deciding based on what truly serves them. Because not everything that brings relief helps. Not everything that gives pleasure nourishes. Not everything that feels good today deserves a place in your life tomorrow. Sometimes what makes you smile for 10 minutes charges you peace for an entire week. And here comes a question that stings, because it tears down a lot of excuses. When you say you cannot quit a certain habit, a certain excess, a certain compulsive search for pleasure, is it really that you cannot, or that you do not want to go through the discomfort of changing? Because most of the time the problem is not inability, it is consent. You have made a deal with what weakens you because it offers quick gratification. It steals your strength, yes, but it gives you immediate comfort. And little by little you hand yourself over in small installments. No one destroys themselves all at once. They wear themselves down through repeated concessions. Musonius Rufus, Epictetus's teacher and a man not easily impressed by human excuses, taught that training the soul is like training the body. Without discipline, there is no strength. Not so you become rigid, but so you become steady. And steadiness means your well-being does not depend on satisfying every desire that appears. It means you can say enough without feeling like the world is ending. It means you can choose what is simple without feeling punished. Strange how rare that has become in an age that sells weakness packaged as self-love. Start by reclaiming small, conscious acts of renunciation. Not to prove anything, but to remind yourself that you are still in charge. Let go of an unnecessary pleasure once in a while. Tolerate silence without rushing to fill it. Eat with moderation. Rest with purpose. Use things without letting them use you. At first it is uncomfortable, of course. Your mind protests like a spoiled child who finally had the remote taken away. But then something valuable happens. Your strength returns. Your clarity returns. Your self-respect returns. Because temperance does not take life away from you. It gives you back command of your life. And with that command restored, there is an inevitable next step. 4. Set firm boundaries and learn to say no without guilt. This point especially burns for good people, or rather for people who have confused goodness with unlimited availability. They got used to being there for everyone, fixing things, giving in, understanding, putting up with things, staying quiet so they would not make anyone uncomfortable. And then one day they feel exhausted, resentful, invisible. Yet they still have the nerve to wonder why. Because you have turned your kindness into permission for others to invade your time, your energy, and your peace. It is that simple. And as long as you keep calling that constant self-abandonment love, they will keep draining you with a smile. Setting boundaries does not make you cruel. It makes you clear. And clarity bothers people who are very comfortable taking advantage of your confusion. There are people who do not want your well-being. They want access to you. They want to be able to call when it suits them, dump their problems on you, ask for favors at all hours, take up your attention as if it belonged to them. And you, just so you do not look bad, say yes even though everything inside you tightens. You smile while swallowing your irritation. You help while resentment keeps building. You give in while abandoning yourself. What an elegant combination for manufacturing moral exhaustion. The problem is that you were taught to feel guilty every time you protect yourself. As if saying no were betrayal. As if taking distance was selfish. As if needing space made you a bad person. But tell me something. What good is your generosity if it comes from fear? What value does your help have if deep down you are saying yes with your lips and no with your soul? That is not virtue, that is people-pleasing. And people-pleasing always comes with a hidden price: resentment, exhaustion, loss of identity. Because every no you do not say in time turns into a silent wound against yourself. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that the nature of each thing is preserved when it fulfills its function rightly. Yours is not to be anyone's emotional doormat. Yours is not to stay available to everyone while your inner life runs out of air. Fulfilling your role in life with justice also means protecting your boundaries, because an overwhelmed person is no longer of much use to others or to themselves. And this is not pretty theory. You can see it in the schedule, in the body, in the mood, in the way you get to the end of the day feeling like you were everywhere except with yourself. Learning to say no without guilt requires a small inner revolution. You have to accept that not everyone is going to understand your change. Some will get upset. Others will accuse you of changing as if growing up was some kind of offense. Others will try to make you feel selfish so they can regain the control they used to have over your time and emotions. That is where you find out whether your boundary was real or decorative. because setting boundaries when no one protests is easy. The hard part is holding them when manipulation shows up dressed as disappointment. There is a rather bitter irony in all this. Many times you are afraid to say no because you fear losing certain people. But what you really lose by not saying it is yourself. You lose rest, focus, authenticity. You become a version of yourself that is functional, pleasant, useful, and deeply disconnected from its own needs. And for what? So you can keep being approved of by people who only want you accessible. That is not affection. That is convenience under flattering lighting. Epictetus taught that no one can force you internally without your consent. And although he was speaking about the freedom of judgment, that also applies to your relationships. Many times it is not other people's demands that control you. It is your need for approval. It is not the other person's request that enslaves you. It is your terror of disappointing them. That is why the work is not just about learning firm phrases, but about tolerating the discomfort of not being liked by everyone. That is where real boundaries are born. Not when you rehearse perfect responses in the mirror, but when you can handle someone getting irritated because they can no longer use you the same way. Start by doing what you should have done long ago. Reply later when you need space. Turn down what you cannot carry without betraying yourself. Do not over-explain. Do not decorate every boundary with endless apologies as if protecting your peace were some kind of diplomatic crime. A clear, respectful no is worth more than a resentful yes. And when you learn that, something interesting happens. You stop treating yourself like the last resort in your own life. Then you are ready for the next level, because after setting boundaries outwardly, it is time to examine how you treat yourself inside and how you treat others too, without humiliating yourself or trying to dominate them. 5. Act with justice toward yourself and others, without humiliating yourself or dominating. Because there is a very common trap in adult life that almost no one notices in time. You spend years trying not to hurt others, trying to be decent, fair, considerate, and in that effort you end up tolerating things you should never tolerate, or you swing to the other extreme. You harden yourself, armor yourself, become dry, controlling, proud, and call strength what is really fear in armor. Stoic justice lives in neither of those extremes. It is not about kneeling or stepping on people. It is about standing where you belong with dignity and treating others from that same center. Being just with yourself means stopping talking to yourself as if you were an enemy who has to be corrected by force. Many people make mistakes and punish themselves with a cruelty they would never use on another person. They get something wrong once and call themselves useless. They fail at something and condemn their whole being. They demand zero rest, total perfection, flawless results, constant maturity, endless patience. And when they do not reach that ridiculous fantasy, they despise themselves. Then they brag about being self-aware. No, that is not self-awareness. That is inner abuse with sophisticated vocabulary. But be careful, because doing justice to yourself does not mean excusing everything or turning yourself into a fragile creature no one is allowed to confront. It also means holding yourself to honest standards, keeping your word, admitting when you failed, making amends when you caused harm, stopping the use of your wounds as a license to behave badly. Because there are also people who ask for understanding in everything, but take responsibility for nothing. They want tenderness without discipline, acceptance without correction. They want the world to understand their reasons while they never examine their actions. That is not justice either. That is emotional childishness with good marketing. Justice toward others begins when you understand that no one gives you the right to humiliate others just because you feel strong, or manipulate them just because you feel hurt. There are people who, after being walked over, swear they will never let it happen again, and end up becoming more polished versions of what hurt them. They are no longer humiliated, fine, but now they dominate. They no longer stay silent, but now they crush. They no longer always give in, but now they impose everything. They changed extremes and think they evolved. No. They just went from victims to executioners with a personal growth speech. Hierocles, a less quoted but very lucid Stoic, spoke about expanding our circles of concern, drawing others closer into the sphere of moral respect. In everyday terms, do not turn anyone into an object for your use, not even when you are angry, disappointed, or tired. The fact that someone else is wrong does not authorize you to degrade them. And the fact that you have strength does not make you anyone's supreme judge. Treating others justly means speaking clearly without cruelty, setting boundaries without contempt, correcting without enjoying the power that comes with correcting. And here comes an uncomfortable question. How many times have you sacrificed yourself to be a good person, only to build up resentment and then explode unfairly? It happens all the time. You stay quiet too long, swallow too much, endure too much, and when you cannot take any more, you unleash all the anger at once. Then you tell yourself you had the right. Maybe you had reasons, yes. But having tolerated too much does not make every way of reacting noble. Justice is not only about speaking up when you explode. It is about preventing things from getting that far by acting sooner, speaking sooner, and putting yourself in your place sooner. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that what is right should be done without theater, without vanity, and without bitterness. And that lesson is still exact. Do what needs to be done because it needs to be done. Not to look saintly, not to inspire fear, not to cash in on moral superiority. A just person does not need to put on a show. You can see it in how they treat the waiter, the stranger, the friend, the person who disagrees with them, and also in how they treat themselves when no one is watching. That is the real test, because anyone can look virtuous when everything is going their way. Acting with justice means stopping the sale of your worth in exchange for acceptance, but also stopping the use of your strength to feel above others. It means correcting without humiliating, defending yourself without staining yourself, giving without emptying yourself, receiving without submitting yourself. And when you finally understand that, something settles inside. You stop living at war with others and with yourself. Then a new need appears, almost inevitably, to sustain that peace with structure. Because peace without habits is just a beautiful intention that falls apart on the first chaotic day. 6. Put your habits in order and build peace through routine, not luck. This is where the people who want a calmer life get separated from the ones who actually build one. Because everyone says they want peace, of course. But then they live with no set time to rest, no order, no standards, no basic discipline, improvising each day as if chaos were a form of authenticity. And no, you are not free just because you do everything at random. A lot of the time, you are simply disorganized. And that disorganization steals your energy, clarity, and stability while you dress it up with pretty phrases about going with the flow. Inner peace does not fall from the sky like some mystical dove that one day decides to land on your head. Peace is made, protected, repeated. It becomes a habit. It is in how you start your morning, in how you use your attention, in what you eat, in how much you sleep, in the kind of stimulation you let in the small decisions that seem insignificant but shape your real life. The problem is that a lot of people want well-being with self-sabotaging habits. They want calm while staying on screens until the middle of the night. They want focus with a fragmented mind. They want balance while living in reaction to everything. That is not how it works. Routine is not a prison when it is built well. It is a structure that saves you from unnecessary wear and tear. It keeps you from having to negotiate with yourself all the time. It removes 1,000 pointless decisions that drain your willpower. Because every day you leave your well-being at the mercy of your mood, you condemn yourself to a fragile version of who you are. Today you meditate if you feel inspired. Today you rest if you simply cannot take any more. Today you eat better if you happen to wake up motivated. Today you turn your phone off early if your anxiety allows it. In other words, there is no self-command, only impulses dressed a little better. Seneca repeated that fortune does not give virtue, it merely offers the occasion. Character, by contrast, is forged through deliberate repetition, and that is the exact point. Your peace cannot depend on the week going smoothly, on no one contradicting you, on everything falling into place by itself, on the universe waking up in a cooperative mood. That is not peace. That is dependence on favorable circumstances. Stoic peace has a different texture. It is more like a well-built house in the middle of shifting weather. Outside there may be noise, inside there is structure. Look at your habits with blunt honesty. Not with guilt, with blunt honesty. What are you doing every day that takes more from you than it gives? What are you repeating even though you know it leaves you worse off? Where are you expecting different emotional results from routines that keep reinforcing the exact same disorder? Sometimes anxiety does not need a deep interpretation. It needs you to go to bed at a decent hour. Sometimes your irritability is not an existential trait. It is accumulated exhaustion. Sometimes your feeling of emptiness does not require some great spiritual revelation, but simply stopping living as if your body and mind were disposable tools. Musonius Rufus insisted that philosophy should be visible in daily life, in the way one eats, sleeps, works, and conducts oneself. Not in grand speeches, in the concrete, in the repeated, in the simple. And that is uncomfortable today because we are addicted to solutions that are intense, fast, and exciting. We want a dramatic turning point, a transformational experience, a video that resets our soul in 20 minutes. But real transformation is usually more humble and far less glamorous. It looks like going to bed earlier, going for a walk without excuses, tidying your space, reducing the noise, stopping the endless negotiations with your own commitments like some cheap politician promising changes he has no intention of keeping. And here comes reality's sarcasm. You say you want a peaceful life, but your habits look like they were designed by someone who dislikes you a little. You sleep badly, eat however you can, fill your mind with stimulation, put off what matters, live putting out fires, and then feel surprised when you end up overwhelmed. Truly admirable, the human ability to create storms and then ask the sky for an explanation. Routine does not take away your spontaneity. It gives you back a foundation, and without a foundation, any foolish emotion can knock your whole day over. Start with what is simple and hold to it with stubborn dignity. Set basic hours. Cut down the noise you do not need. Repeat the actions that bring order, even if they do not excite you. Make peace with the idea that many of the good things in life do not feel epic while they are being built. They feel ordinary, and that is exactly why they save you. Because they make peace something less spectacular, but far more reliable. And when your life begins to have structure, the next unavoidable challenge appears. Using that foundation to face what you have been putting off for far too long. 7. Practice courage and face overdue conversations without fear. Because some silences are not peace, they are cowardice dressed up nicely. Silences that do not come from prudence, but from fear of making things uncomfortable, of losing, of looking bad, of discovering that the relationship, the situation, or the image you were holding together was much more fragile than you wanted to admit. So you stay quiet, you delay, you circle around it. You rehearse imaginary scenes in your head while in real life you say nothing. And that price is expensive, because what you do not face in time does not disappear. It rots inside you. There are conversations you know you have needed to have for months, sometimes with a partner, sometimes with a friend, sometimes with a relative, sometimes with yourself, because you are also an expert at avoiding yourself when a truth threatens your comfort. You know something is off. You know there is a wound, an abuse, a distance, a disappointment, a small lie that has already become the structure. But you would rather keep functioning on autopilot than put the cards on the table. After all, as long as no one names the problem, you can pretend it still does not exist. Impressive strategy. Childish, exhausting, but very popular. Stoic courage is not about not feeling fear. It is about not obeying it as if it were a king. Because fear speaks loudly, yes, but it does not always speak reasonably. It paints catastrophes, exaggerates consequences, dramatizes other people's reactions, convinces you that it is better to hold out a little longer. Wait for the perfect moment. Avoid creating tension. Let things work themselves out. And so a week passes, then a month, then a year. The overdue conversation is still there, breathing down your neck. Your body knows it, which is why you tense up. Your mind knows it, which is why you lose focus. Your soul knows it, which is why peace never fully settles. Seneca wrote that we often suffer more in imagination than in reality. And you only have to look at what happens before a difficult conversation to understand it. You put an entire courtroom in your head. You project rejection, yelling, breakups, shame, endless discomfort. But many times when you finally speak, you discover the monster was smaller than your mind had painted it. And other times, yes, the conversation hurts. Yes, the relationship changes. Yes, the truth is uncomfortable. But even then there is an enormous gain. You stop living bent over under the weight of what has gone unsaid. Ask yourself something seriously. How much energy have you spent sustaining what you should have faced already? How much strain comes from continuing to be diplomatic with a situation that is breaking you inside? Everyday cowardice does not always look like running away. Sometimes it looks like excessive politeness, like endless patience, like it is not worth bringing it up right now, like a functional little smile while knots keep building inside. And then, of course, people say you exploded out of nowhere. It was not out of nowhere. It came from cowardly silence repeated for far too long. Courage does not ask you to shout, dramatize, or turn every disagreement into a holy war. It asks something more demanding, to speak clearly, without trembling before the truth. To say what needs to be said without cruelty, but also without hiding behind weak euphemisms. Because many people do not speak clearly and then complain about not being understood. They hint, suggest, throw out indirect remarks, wait for the other person to guess. No, brother. Maturity does not run on telepathy. If something matters, it is named. If something hurts, it is expressed. If something can no longer continue, it is ended with clean words. Epictetus taught that some things depend on us and some do not. Your courage depends on you. The other person's reaction does not, and that distinction is incredibly freeing. Because a difficult conversation is not measured by whether it goes perfectly, but by whether you entered it with truth, dignity, and presence. You cannot control whether the other person listens, matures, or responds well, but you can control no longer betraying yourself out of fear of the outcome, and that alone is a huge moral victory. So stop waiting for the ideal moment, because it almost never comes. Most important conversations happen with a slightly tense voice, a racing heart, and incomplete certainty. Even so, you have them. Even so, you sit down, look straight ahead, and speak. Because every time you do, your character straightens a little more. And every time you keep running, your self-respect notices. Courage does not eliminate the trembling, it moves through it. And after moving through that fear, another necessary freedom appears, one that quietly poisons millions of people today. 8. Let go of comparison and stop measuring your life against other people's lives. Few things destroy inner peace so thoroughly while enjoying such a good social reputation. Comparing yourself has almost become a reflex. You see someone moving forward, and you question yourself. You see someone enjoying life, and you feel behind. You see someone standing out, and you shrink. And all of that without knowing half their story, without knowing what they carry, what they sacrifice, what they pretend, what they hide. But there you are, using edited fragments of other people's lives to pass judgment on your own. A disastrous bargain, to put it plainly. Comparison starts from a very poor idea, that your value depends on how you look next to other people, that you are only doing well if you are not behind, that you only deserve peace if you have more, achieve more, are liked more, produce more, or shine more. It is an absurd race because the finish line keeps moving. There will always be someone faster, more admired, younger, richer, more visible, more celebrated. If you make that the standard for your well-being, you are condemned to live in a constant feeling of insufficiency. And the worst part is that this feeling of insufficiency does not even come from your reality, but from a twisted measure you accepted yourself. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that he should not distract himself by watching too closely what others did, said, or thought, except when necessary to act justly. That discipline today would almost be an act of rebellion. Because we live in a time that trains you to monitor other people's lives until you forget your own. You know about their vacations, their achievements, their partner, their progress, their body, their house, their smile. And meanwhile, your relationship with yourself grows poorer, so much attention directed outward, and so little life being built within. Comparison is also deceptive, because it never compares cleanly. You do not place two complete realities side by side. You place your daily chaos next to someone else's most presentable moment. You compare your doubts to their confident pose, your slow process to their visible result, your scars to their emotional makeup. How could you not come out losing on a scale like that? It is like looking at a shop window and deciding your kitchen is a failure because it does not look like a magazine spread. The comparing mind does exactly that. It takes someone else's surface and uses it to despise your own inner life. And here comes a necessary question. What part of your life have you neglected because you were too busy watching someone else's? Because that is the real cost. Not only do you feel worse, you also distract yourself from what you actually could be doing. Instead of working on your own path, you stand by the roadside watching who passes you. Instead of being grateful for what you are already building, You minimize it because it does not resemble someone else's mold. Instead of respecting your rhythm, you insult yourself for not fitting into a timeline that was never yours to begin with. Epictetus warned that when we admire externals too much, we hand over our freedom. And comparison does exactly that. It gives your peace over to external markers: applause, status, appearance, validation, visible progress. Everything that depends at least partly on the world begins to govern your inner state. And then you are no longer living, you are evaluating yourself. You are no longer experiencing your path, you are judging it. You are no longer grateful for what you have, you are belittling it because it does not compete well. An extraordinarily elegant way to ruin your life without lifting a finger. Letting go of comparison does not mean giving up admiration, learning, or inspiration. It means stopping the use of other people's lives as a weapon against your own. You can recognize someone else's brilliance without turning it into proof of your lack. You can applaud without feeling diminished. You can learn without degrading yourself. That takes character, because a wounded ego wants to turn every talent in others into a threat. But when you mature, you understand that existence is not a uniform competition where everyone runs on the same track. Every life has different burdens, timing, debts, talents, losses, and callings. Comparing them as if they were identical is not discipline, it is clumsiness. Start looking less in order to measure and more in order to live. Reduce your exposure to whatever triggers that sterile hunger for validation. Return to your own process. Honor your pace. Do your work better, care for your mind, strengthen your character, and let others walk their path without turning it into a courtroom against you. Because peace returns when you stop judging your worth through borrowed eyes. And when you finally let go of that obsession with comparing yourself, the last step remains the most important one of all. 9. Become your own best company and live with daily purpose. This is where the journey ends, but it is also where the most serious part begins. Because after accepting solitude, ordering your mind, tempering your impulses, setting boundaries, acting with justice, putting your habits in order, facing overdue conversations, and letting go of comparison, one question remains, and almost no one asks it honestly. When everything goes quiet, when no one is distracting you, when there is no applause, no messages, no urgency, no noise, who are you to yourself? That answer defines far more of your happiness than any external circumstance ever will. Being your own best company does not mean locking yourself inside a narcissistic bubble or repeating pretty phrases in the mirror while your life stays in disorder. It means your own presence does not weigh on you. It means you can live within yourself without running away. It means you do not need to escape from yourself the moment free time appears, because there are people who cannot stand being with themselves for even 10 minutes without some kind of stimulation. They need music, a screen, a chat, background noise, movement, something, anything, just so they do not have to fall into that uncomfortable meeting with their own inner life. And then, of course, they say they are searching for peace. But peace begins right there, in stopping the escape from your own company as if you were an unlivable place. To achieve that, you need purpose. Not something grand, theatrical, or messianic. You do not need to feel like you came to change human history before your morning coffee. You need something more grounded and far more powerful, to know what you are living for today, what kind of person you are trying to become, what small but real duty belongs to you, what action makes you worthy at the end of the day. Because a life without daily purpose rots in distractions. It fills up with false obligations, attractive noise, and meaningless exhaustion. You do many things, yes, but none of them gather you within yourself. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself upon waking that he had been born to do the work proper to a human being. And that phrase, spoken by an emperor who had real problems and not just schedule-related whims, still lands hard. Waking up with purpose does not mean living in a rush. It means living with direction. Knowing that your day cannot be reduced to replying to messages, putting out fires, chasing dopamine, and reaching the night with the vague feeling that you survived another shift. That is not life. That is biological maintenance with a calendar. Become someone whose company is breathable, because they speak to themselves with honesty, treat themselves with respect, and move through life with direction. That does not happen by accident. It is built in the details, in how you speak to yourself when you fail, in how you use your time when no one is watching, in what you choose to do with a free afternoon, in what you prioritize when you could just numb yourself. Do you see why this matters so much? Because in the end, you will not always get to choose who stays, who leaves, who understands you, who disappoints you, who walks beside you. But you can choose whether you will keep being a stranger to yourself or finally become a home. Epictetus taught that no one is free unless they govern themselves. And governing yourself does not mean living rigidly or perfectly, but living with presence, with awareness of what matters most. Being able to be alone without feeling punished. Being able to work on something valuable without needing constant approval. Being able to enjoy without losing yourself. Being able to rest without guilt. Being able to look in the mirror without feeling like you are seeing someone who has betrayed you too many times. That is a form of happiness far more solid than euphoria. Quieter, yes. Much truer, too. So, stop waiting for life to send you someone who will complete you, rescue you, or give you the peace you have not cultivated. That role belongs to no one else. It belongs to you. And far from being a sentence, that is an immense liberation. Because when you become your own best company, the world stops being a desperate marketplace for validation. Your relationships improve, silence stops being frightening, your decisions become clearer, and daily purpose stops feeling like a burden and becomes a compass. At that point, happiness no longer depends so much on what arrives, but on what you sustain. And with that, we come to the close, because understanding this changes the way you live at the root. It is no longer about chasing peace the way someone chases an impossible butterfly, but about building an inner life so steady that peace has somewhere to stay. If you made it this far, you have already seen that happiness is not a prize the world hands you once everything finally turns out the way you wanted. It is a way of being with yourself, of governing yourself, of stopping the begging, of thinking clearly, of living with boundaries, order, courage, and purpose. It was never a lack of luck. It was a lack of inner direction. And as hard as that may sound, that is also good news, because it means you can still do something with your life starting today. Tell me in the comments which of these 9 principles hit you the hardest, and which one you need to start practicing right away. I want to hear from you. And if this video held up a mirror and helped you put something in order within yourself, subscribe to the Stoic Garden and join me for the next ones. We are not here to decorate wounds with pretty phrases. We are here to build character. Remember this when the video ends and you return to the usual noise. If you do not learn how to live well with yourself, nothing you achieve out there will ever be enough. But when you make peace with yourself, when you stop abandoning yourself, even the difficult days stop breaking you completely. That is where a more serious peace begins. Cleaner, deeper, more your own. See you in the next video.